So I read 70 books in the year of 2024, and not all of them were great. I had some DNFs and definitely not worse books, but I will definitely say disappointing for sure. So I think we should go through the DNFs of the year, and I DNF'd about 8 books in the year of 2024, which is not so bad. I would rather DNF than read through a lot of bad books. So the first book that I DNF'd last year was The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. This is a very popular new adult fantasy trilogy, and I was excited to get into this. I got my copy from a fairy loot box, and I also had the self-published book as well. So I gave it a try. I think I just wasn't in love with the writing style. I wasn't connected with the characters either, and for me, if I'm not connected to the characters, I'm not invested in the story. And it was just simple as that. I wasn't connecting to anything. The concept itself was really cool, where there are 6 people chosen to join the Alexandrian Society, but only 5 can actually be in this society. So they would have to prove themselves through, I think, a series of trials. Where I was at the point of DNFing, I haven't been through the trials, which I think I DNF'd at the halfway point. So it's still a lot of build up, and I just wasn't connected to the characters, like I said. So that was a no for me. I really wish I did like it, but also I don't, because I've heard not such great things about the sequels, and I think I'm fine with not reading this trilogy. The next book that I DNF'd last year was Badlands by Stacey Marie Brown. This is the 4th book in the Savage Land series, which is a fantasy romance series, an urban fantasy romance series that I really did enjoy the first 3 books, but once everything happened in the 3rd book, the 4th book felt a little bit repetitive and I kind of lost interest. I read this for the Alpha Ho Book Club, which is Becca from Becca and the Books Patreon book club, and like I said, I was having so much fun with the first 3 books, but I think once the couple kind of got together, it was very repetitive in terms of the romance and the sex scenes. It was just a lot, and I wasn't as invested in the plot. I was just there for the entertainment factor, and once that weared off, I just wasn't interested anymore. So that was a DNF for me, but I still do recommend it. I mean, if you can get past all that and just have fun with this series, I think someone will really like this. I think majority of the people in Patreon did like it, but I think by the time they got to book 6, it felt a bit repetitive and the entertainment value was already gone. The 3rd book that I DNF'd was The Curse of Saints by Kate Dramas. This was another fairy loot book that I had, and I gave it a try, and I immediately just wasn't vibing with this book. This is a adult fantasy romance series, I want to say, and it was just something that I've read time and time before, and I again was not interested with the characters because they just felt like a carbon copy of another fantasy romance, just like a general fantasy romance as a genre I feel like I've read from before. So I didn't get very much into this, probably like 50 to 60 pages, and I just DNF'd it. Simple as that. I know other people have enjoyed this series because it felt very similar to other fantasy romance series, which good for them. For me, I just turned the other way of the spectrum. The 4th book that I DNF'd was Caraval by Stephanie Garber. This was a real surprise to me. This is a very beloved trilogy, and also there's a spin-off series as well, which I kind of do want to try, but I feel like I need to read Caraval before I give that spin-off series a try. But if I don't, please let me know down in the comments. The thing with Caraval that I DNF'd, it's because of the magic system, and it's something that I usually don't like in my fantasy books, and that is kind of like dream-like magic system, kind of like the Starless Sea, where it's like a magical realism and it's like all dreamy and speculative, and I wasn't a fan of that, which is really sad. And I wasn't invested enough in the story and the characters, and I wasn't intrigued enough to continue, and I just wasn't vibing with the magic system at all, which is a real shame. I do want to give the other series a try, so again, let me know down in the comments if you think I can read it without reading Caraval. Next up is The Fury by Alex Michaelides. This is another case of I've read this type of thriller before, so I know what's gonna happen and what the ending was, and I was right. I got about a couple chapters in and I know where it was heading, and I immediately knew who the killer was, etc, etc. And for me, when it comes to thrillers and murder mysteries, I kind of want to be surprised. I don't want that predictability, or even if it does have the predictability, I want to enjoy the ride. But because I've read this type of thriller before, I know the journey, I know the ride, and I skimmed the end, and of course I was right because it's been done before and I just wasn't impressed, hence why I DNF'd it. I don't think I will ever pick up another Alex Michaelides book because so far with the 3 books, I've only liked Silent Patient, did not like The Maidens, did not like The Fury. Maybe I will give one more try, but I probably won't. I think he was a one-hit wonder for me. The sixth book that I DNF'd was Son of Blood and Ruin by Marley Laris. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not sure. And this is yet another Fairyloot book that I got. Problem with this was it was a historical fantasy, and I do not vibe with historical fantasy. But I really did appreciate the world building in this because it's to do with Aztec Mexican mythology, and it was really, really interesting. But just the setting and also the writing style, it was very like I did this and then this happened and then I did this and then this happened. It's very short and abrupt, and it took me out of the story a lot. And I did not like the writing style either, but it was mainly because of the historical fantasy. Like, because of the setting and like the history of it, I really was not interested whatsoever. And the seventh book that I DNF'd last year was Long Live Evil by Sarah Reese Brennan. This is yet another Fairyloot book that I read, and it was really, really unique and interesting. It's about this girl who has cancer, and she kind of escapes from reality through reading this book series that her sister and her really, really love. And she has that opportunity to save herself by going into this favorite fantasy world of hers and trying to find this thing to save herself. Really unique concept, really meta, really liked it. But it was just too humorous, and the humor of it wasn't to my taste. And the world building of this was so clunky that I was so confused. I don't think that is to the detriment of the book. I think it's just me that I didn't like the way that the world was built. So I wasn't like interested in this as much, and I was so frustrated with this. But then also the humor as well just really didn't connect to me, and I just didn't want to read that book anymore. And I've seen a lot of people really love it, especially people that I trust because they have similar tastes with me, really like this book. But I think I'm okay DNFing this book because I wasn't really having a good time with it. And the eighth and final book that I DNF'd in 2024 is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. Another one that I really, really wanted to like. It is a hyped up fantasy romance that was self-published, that was picked up by a traditional publisher, and I thought it was gonna be good. Picked it up, and it was just so fast-paced, especially the romance. When you go into the fantasy romance, I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like the romance has to be slow build and like have some type of development before going into the romance. But for me, this was so insta-love and like, or so insta-lust that I just didn't believe the romance. And if I don't believe the romance, I can't get into it. It's so fast-paced. It was such a shame. I really wanted to like this one because there was dragons in it, and yeah, I was very disappointed. I guess you can add it to the disappointment list, but it was a DNF. And now we can get into the worst slash disappointing books of 2024 for me. And I won't say it is the worst books that I've ever read. It was just, most of it was really disappointing because I expected more. The first book that I want to talk about, I actually forgot that I read in 2024, and that says a lot, and that breaks my heart a lot, because the book in question is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas. Like, who is she? What do you mean Sarah J Maas is in a worst books of the year video? I don't understand. I forgot that I read this year. It's so bad. It's so disappointing. And I feel a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, the people that I know have also the same sentiment as me, and it's really hard to talk about as always because I love Sarah J Maas. Like, girl, what happened? What happened? I gave this 4 stars because I cannot, my heart is already broken. I don't know if I can give any of her books less than 4 stars. So this is the third book in the Crescent City series. Second book was not as great as the first one, and then the third one, I feel I was more disappointed in than book 2, because book 2 was a lot of character development and introducing new characters, which is fine. And then the third book, I was expecting a Sarah J Maas ending, as we all know, but it was such a disappointment. There was barely any stakes. Yes, there were some Sarah J Maas elements that I did like in this, but like the characters, I don't even know them. They changed so much in this, at least for me, and the things that I wanted to dive into weren't dove into. I just had a lot of problems with this, and it was really, really disappointing. I will obviously pick up more books from Sarah J Maas, but I would not have any more high expectations, which is really heartbreaking to say. It really is. Also, there's 7 books on this list I haven't mentioned. But the second book I want to talk about is King of Greed by Anna Huang. Another disappointment because I really like the Twisted series, and when I read King of Pride, I wasn't impressed, and I was confused as to why there was not a lot of concentration on the romance development. It was very surface level for me, and then I was expecting more with the next book, which is King of Greed, because the premise sounds so interesting. It's a second chance romance, so I had a lot of expectations of this because it sounds so good. But again, it fell flat because I feel like there was not enough development. There was not a lot of pining and atonement when it comes to second chance romances. It was, again, very surface level. And I gave this 3.5 stars. But the next book, which is King of Sloth, I want to say, it definitely did get better. Not as much as the second and third book, but I still really enjoyed King of Sloth for sure. But yeah, I was really disappointed with King of Greed. The third book that I was very disappointed in was The Bride Test by Helen Huang, and I gave this book 3 stars. So with the Kiss Quotient, I gave it 4.5, and then the Heart Principle, I gave 5 stars. I love the Heart Principle, and I was so surprised about The Bride Test that was just 3 stars. I just didn't believe in the chemistry between main 2 love interests. Because of that, mainly, I did not enjoy this book. I guess there was other issues that I had, but it was kind of spoilery. It's to do with keeping a secret, and that secret shouldn't have been kept in the dark in my opinion, but it is what it is. I mainly just didn't believe or got into the chemistry between the 2 characters. It was just a dud for me, which was really sad, but highly recommend The Heart Principle. Love that book. The 4th book on this list is The Good, the Bad, and the Aunties by Jessie Sutanto. So this is the 3rd book in the Dial A for Aunties series. I love this series, and it's mainly because of nostalgia. I am from Malaysia, born and raised, and the language that used in this is Indonesian, which is very close to Bahasa Malaysia. So there was a lot of nostalgia rammed into this, and I absolutely love the aunties. But this 3rd book was definitely not as good as even the 2nd book. The 2nd book wasn't good as the first one, but it still was funny and it was good. In this book, the aunties get in trouble with the Indonesian mob, and it's crazy. It is funny-ish, and I did enjoy, again, the nostalgia factor in this and the humor in this, but the plot was just so out there and so crazy that it was kind of a bit of a disappointment because I wanted to be as good as Dial A for Aunties and even the 2nd book, but it was disappointing that it wasn't. But I still would recommend Dial A for Aunties for sure. I love the aunties so much. And I don't know if this is the last book in the series, but if this is another book, I think I will pick it up because, again, nostalgia factor is heavy in this and I would like to read more of it. The 5th book is a 2 combo because it's in the same series, and that is My Dark Romeo and My Dark Desire by LJ Shen and S. Huntington. This is a contemporary dark romance series. Book 1 and book 2 I read. Book 3, I don't think it's out yet. I know I won't read it. So, My Dark Romeo, I picked it up because the premise sounded really good. It was a marriage of convenience, which is one of my favorite tropes, and I didn't think anything of it. But oh my god, it is a dark and wild and angsty and entertaining ride, and it's so ridiculous. If you ever read 365 Days, is that the book? I don't know. But if you read 365 Days and how ridiculous that book was, but it was so entertaining, it's kind of like that. And then with the 2nd book, My Dark Desire, the entertainment value kind of just was non-existent. So I wasn't enjoying myself as much as My Dark Romeo, but it was still somewhat good. If not, I would have DNF'd it. So I gave book 1 3 stars, and then I gave book 2 2.5 stars. But I definitely won't continue on with the series because the 3rd book is following one of their friends who is essentially pervert, and I don't want to read about him. I would recommend My Dark Romeo because it's a really, really fun time. A fucked up fun time, but it's a fun time. The 6th book on this list is, I think, the 2nd most disappointing of the bunch. The first one is, of course, House of Flame and Shadow, but I think this is the most 2nd disappointing, and that is The Ending Fire by Sarah Al-Arifi. I have the Goldsboro version of this, so this is how you are going to see the title. So this is the 3rd book in the Ending Fire series, and I loved book 1. Book 2 was not as great for me just because I had issues with the main character, Sila. Could not stand her. It impacted my reading of that book, but I really did enjoy book 2's world building and getting to know more about the world and expanding it. Book 3, I expected all to come together and all of that, but I was so disappointed with how one of the characters ended up and the predictability of this, which is really surprising because book 1 and book 2 was so good, and this one just did not hit the mark. It did did not land as it should. And even the ending. To this day, I've read this book a couple months now and I still can't put my finger on what happened and why I felt so disappointed with this book. I did really like our side characters' development, but with our main character, Anor, so disappointing with her character arc. Scylla, I never really liked her. Even for her arc, it was just so bland. And the plot, it went in a direction that I liked, but there was no stakes. I felt like it was very surface level. Everything was very surface level. There was not really much stakes, and I just didn't like the way it ended. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was really disappointing, especially when the first book was so good. And the 7th and final book in this list is also another ending to a trilogy, and that is A Darkness at Sethanon by Raymond E. Feist. This is the 3rd and final book in the Rift War saga. I really liked book 2. Book 1 was very long, and it was kind of contained within itself. So book 2's plot and book 3 kind of overarched together, and there are some plot points in book 1 that came into play in book 2 and book 3. I gave this one 3.5 stars, and I loved the first half of this book. There was so much character development, there was so much world building, which I absolutely loved. And then the latter half in this is what disappointed me. In this book, I realized how the magic system in this series so far has not been explained at all. Our character just keeps leveling up in magic, but it's not explained what magic he has and also what kind of magic he learned or how he learned it or how he powered up. Nothing of that sort. He just learned more magic and became more powerful. And for me, that's not enough. I want more explanations. Another thing that disappointed me in this book is the battle scenes, because there's a lot of battle in this series in general, but there was one particular battle scene that is a really huge battle scene, but it was so cut and dry and so descriptive that it was like reading a manual play-by-play of like a battle. It was really boring, it was really dry, and I did not enjoy it. There was not a lot of twists and turns. Like, you know, with a battle scene, you're supposed to feel this tension and all of this battle playing out and you're scared for the characters. Nothing whatsoever, which was again really disappointing. And the ending of this again was fine because of the lack of explanation when it comes to the magic system. With this, they used magic to solve the problem, and if that wasn't explained, how am I supposed to know anything? But yeah, very disappointed in this, and I will definitely be reading more Raymond E. Feist. Hopefully he has improved in his other series. There's like a huge number of books that he's written, and it's all kind of in the same universe. So that is all the DNFs and the disappointing books that I've read in 2024. I don't like making these videos because I don't like to shit on books, but you know what? Sometimes what doesn't work for me might work for someone else. Down in the comments, let me know what book disappointed you or what was your worst book of 2024. Thank you so much for watching and hanging out with me, and I will see you later. Bye!